The gunshot that rang through the dusty streets of Fairplay, Colorado on that scorching August afternoon in 1878 would change Florence Mitchell's life forever, though not in the way anyone might have expected. Florence stood frozen on the wooden boardwalk outside Henderson's general store, her basket of groceries tumbling from her arms as she watched a stranger in a worn leather duster dive behind a water trough. The man moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost practiced, drawing his revolver with such speed that Florence barely registered the motion. Another shot cracked through the air, splintering the post inches from where her head had been moments before. "Get down!" The stranger shouted, his voice rough but commanding. Florence's legs finally obeyed, and she dropped to her knees, her heart hammering against her ribs. She could hear shouting from inside the saloon across the street, followed by the thunder of boots on wooden floors. The stranger fired twice, deliberately aiming high over the heads of the men stumbling out of the establishment. They scattered like startled chickens, diving back through the swinging doors. Within seconds, her brother Marcus appeared from the sheriff's office, his deputy Samuel close behind. Marcus's face was flushed with anger as he took in the scene, his eyes landing first on Florence huddled against the storefront, then on the stranger still crouched behind the trough. "Nobody moves," Marcus bellowed, his own weapon drawn. "You there behind the trough. Stand up slow with your hands where I can see them." The stranger complied, rising with his hands raised, the revolver dangling from one finger by the trigger guard. Florence could finally see him clearly now. He was tall, perhaps in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his dusty shirt. His jaw was shadowed with several days' worth of stubble, and his eyes were the most striking shade of blue she had ever seen, like the sky just before twilight. "Sheriff, those men in the saloon started it," the stranger said calmly, his voice steady despite the weapon pointed at his chest. "I was just passing through when they took exception to my presence." "That's so," Marcus approached cautiously. "And what makes you so special that honest folk would start shooting at you?" "Nothing, sir. I am nobody special at all, just a man looking for work and a hot meal." Florence slowly stood, brushing the dust from her cornflower blue dress. Her hands were still shaking, but she found her voice. "Marcus, he is telling the truth. I saw it. Those men from the saloon came out shooting first. This man actually pushed that woman there out of harm's way." She gestured toward Mrs. Henderson, who was peering nervously from her shop doorway. Marcus's expression softened slightly as he looked at his sister, but his jaw remained set. "Florence, get yourself home. This is official business." "I am a witness to what happened," Florence insisted, lifting her chin the way she always did when her brother tried to order her around. At 23 years old, she was tired of being treated like a child. "And I will give my statement just like anyone else would." The stranger's eyes flickered to Florence, and something like appreciation crossed his features before he returned his attention to the sheriff. Marcus sighed heavily, clearly recognizing that particular tone in his sister's voice. He had been her guardian since their parents died of fever 6 years ago, and while he meant well, Florence often felt suffocated by his overprotective nature. "Fine," Marcus said. "Everyone involved, come to my office. Samuel, go into that saloon and bring out whoever started this mess." 10 minutes later, Florence sat in the sheriff's office watching as Marcus questioned the stranger. His name was Samuel Lawson, and he had been drifting from town to town for the past 3 years, taking odd jobs where he could find them. He was originally from Missouri, but the war had left him with little reason to return home. "War ended 13 years ago," Marcus pointed out, leaning back in his chair. "That is a long time to be wandering." Samuel's expression remained neutral, but Florence saw something flicker in those blue eyes. Pain, perhaps, or memories he would rather forget. "Yes, sir, it is. But some of us came back to nothing. Family gone, farm sold for taxes. I made my peace with having no roots a long time ago. And the men who started shooting at you, never saw them before in my life, Sheriff. Best I can figure, they did not like the look of me. Or maybe they were just drunk and looking for entertainment. It happens." Samuel spoke with such matter-of-fact acceptance that Florence felt her heart squeeze with sympathy. She could not imagine living without a home, without family, drifting from place to place with no destination in mind. It sounded terribly lonely. Marcus questioned the three men from the saloon next, and their story quickly fell apart under scrutiny. They had indeed started the confrontation, taking offense at Samuel's presence in what they considered their establishment. One of them, a bulky man named Garrett with tobacco-stained teeth, finally admitted they had thought Samuel was someone else, someone who had cheated them at cards in Denver. "Even if he was," Marcus said coldly, "you do not start shooting in the middle of town. You could have hit innocent people. You did nearly hit my sister." His voice dropped dangerously low on those last words. The three men paled, realizing the severity of their situation. Everyone in Fairplay knew that Marcus Mitchell was a fair man, but he was fiercely protective of his younger sister. Threatening her, even accidentally, was not something he would overlook. "We will pay the fine, Sheriff," Garrett said quickly. "It will not happen again." "No, it will not, because you three are banned from carrying weapons in town limits for the next 6 months. You will each pay a $50 fine for disturbing the peace and reckless endangerment. And if I see any of you causing trouble again, you will spend a month in my jail. Are we clear?" They agreed hastily, paid their fines, and left the office with their tails between their legs. Marcus turned back to Samuel, who had waited patiently through the entire proceeding. "You are free to go," Marcus said, "but I would appreciate it if you moved on from Fairplay by morning. Nothing personal, but trouble seems to follow drifters." "Marcus." Florence stood abruptly, surprising herself with her own vehemence. "This man did nothing wrong. In fact, he protected people today. Is that how we treat someone who risks his own safety for others? Florence, stay out of this." "No, I will not stay out of it." "You are being unfair, and you know it." Samuel raised a hand, a slight smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "It is all right, miss. I am used to moving on. I will be gone by sunrise." "Where will you go?" Florence asked, ignoring her brother's warning glare. Samuel shrugged. "Wherever the road takes me, I suppose. Maybe up toward Leadville. I heard they are hiring at the mines." "The mines are dangerous work," Florence said, "and they exploit their workers terribly. You seem like a capable man. Surely there are better opportunities." "Florence, enough," Marcus said firmly. "Samuel Lawson can take care of himself. He does not need your concern." But as Samuel left the office, tipping his hat to Florence with a murmured "Madam," she found that she could not simply dismiss him from her thoughts. There had been something in his eyes, a depth of character that intrigued her. And the way he had handled himself during the shooting, the calm competence and the deliberate choice to fire warning shots rather than aim to kill, spoke of a man with principles. That evening, Florence prepared supper for Marcus and herself in their small house at the edge of town. Their home was modest but comfortable, with whitewashed walls and curtains Florence had sewn herself. She moved through the familiar motions of cooking, but her mind kept drifting back to the stranger with the striking blue eyes. "You are thinking about him," Marcus said from where he sat at the table, cleaning his revolver. Florence nearly dropped the pot she was holding. "What?" "The drifter." "Samuel Lawson. I saw the way you looked at him." "I was not looking at him in any particular way," Florence protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "I simply think you are being unjust. He helped people today." Marcus set down his gun and regarded his sister seriously. "Florence, I know you have a kind heart. It is one of the things I love most about you. But men like Lawson are not the settling kind. They are running from something always. I do not want to see you get hurt." "I am not a child anymore, Marcus. I am 23 years old. Most women my age are married with children." "That is another conversation entirely," Marcus said, his tone softening. "I know you think I am too protective. Maybe I am. But you are all the family I have left. I just want you to be safe and happy." Florence carried the pot to the table and began serving their meal. "I know you mean well. But sometimes being safe means being trapped. I have lived in Fairplay my entire life. I have never been further than Colorado Springs. I have never taken a risk or done anything unexpected." "Does that not sound like a very small life to you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, pushing his food around his plate. "Our parents wanted stability for us. After everything that happened during the war, the chaos and uncertainty, they chose this life deliberately." "There is value in stability, Florence. I am not saying there is not, but there is also value in possibility, in the unknown." She sat down across from him. "When I saw Samuel Lawson today, you know what I noticed? The way he moved to protect others before protecting himself. The way he avoided killing those men even though he clearly could have. And when you told him to leave town, he agreed without argument or resentment. He is not just some dangerous drifter, Marcus. He is a good man who has had a hard life. You got all that from watching him for a few minutes. Sometimes you can tell things about people, the important things." Marcus reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Promise me you will be careful. That is all I ask." "I promise," Florence said, though she was not entirely sure what she was promising to be careful about. It was not as if she would ever see Samuel Lawson again. By morning, he would be gone, just another stranger passing through their small town. But as Florence lay in bed that night, listening to the wind whistle through the cottonwood trees outside her window, she could not shake the feeling that something significant had shifted in her life. The world suddenly seemed larger, full of possibilities she had never considered before. She woke early the next morning before dawn had fully broken. Unable to sleep, she dressed quickly and walked to the town square. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dust. A few shopkeepers were already opening their establishments, and she could hear the distant lowing of cattle from the stockyards. Florence was not entirely sure what drew her to the stable, but she found herself standing outside the weathered building, watching as the stable master prepared horses for the day. And there, saddling a rangy chestnut mare, was Samuel Lawson. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his features. "Miss Mitchell, you are up early." "I could not sleep," Florence admitted. "I wanted to apologize for my brother. He is not usually so unwelcoming to strangers." Samuel tightened the cinch on his saddle and patted the mare's neck. "No apology necessary. He is just looking out for his town and his sister. I respect that. Where will you go?" "Not sure yet. Maybe east toward Kansas. I heard they are hiring ranch hands for the autumn cattle drives." Florence took a step closer, her heart beating faster than it should. "What if you did not have to go? What if there was work for you here?" Samuel's hand stilled on the saddle. "Your brother made his position clear, miss, and truthfully I understand it. A sheriff cannot afford to have questionable characters hanging around." "You are not a questionable character," Florence insisted. "You are exactly the kind of man this town needs, someone capable and brave and decent." The words hung in the air between them, and Florence felt her cheeks flush as she realized how they sounded. But she did not take them back. She meant every word. Samuel studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes searching her face. "Why does it matter to you? You do not know anything about me." "I know enough," Florence said. "I know that when bullets were flying, you thought of others before yourself. I know that you could have killed those men yesterday but chose not to. I know that you have been wandering for 3 years, and I suspect it is not because you want to, but because you think you have to. Am I wrong?" Samuel let out a long breath and leaned against his horse. "You see a lot for someone who just met me. So I am not wrong." "No," he admitted quietly. "You are not wrong, but that does not change the facts, Miss Mitchell. I do not have anything to offer. No land, no prospects, no future beyond the next town and the next job. That is not the kind of man a woman like you should concern herself with." "A woman like me?" Florence bristled slightly. "And what kind of woman do you think I am? The kind who deserves stability, security, a man who can give her a home and a family, all the things I cannot provide." Florence moved closer still, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker blue in his eyes, the small scar above his left eyebrow. "What if I told you that I have had stability my entire life, and it feels like a cage? What if I told you that I am tired of being safe and predictable? What if I wanted something different?" "Then I would say you are romanticizing a hard life," Samuel said gently. "There is nothing romantic about going hungry, about sleeping rough, about never knowing where you will be from one week to the next. I am not romanticizing anything. I am simply saying that maybe you deserve a chance to stop running. Maybe you deserve to find out what it would be like to have a home again." Samuel's expression softened, and he reached out as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it and dropped his hand. "You are a remarkable woman, Florence Mitchell, but I learned a long time ago not to hope for things I cannot have. What if you could have them?" a voice said from behind Florence. Both she and Samuel turned to find Marcus standing a few yards away, his arms crossed over his chest. Florence had no idea how long her brother had been there or how much he had heard. "Marcus, I can explain," Florence began, but he held up a hand. "No need. I heard enough." He walked closer, his expression unreadable. "Samuel Lawson, I may have been hasty yesterday. My sister has a point. You did right by this town when you did not have to. That counts for something." Samuel straightened, clearly surprised. "I appreciate that, Sheriff, but like I told your sister, I am not the staying kind." "Maybe not," Marcus agreed. "Or maybe you just have not found a reason to stay yet." "I have been thinking about what Florence said last night, about how we treat people who help us. It did not sit right with me, turning you away when you protected innocent folks." "What are you saying, Marcus?" Florence asked, barely daring to hope. "I am saying that Tom Wright has been trying to sell his ranch for 6 months now. He wants to move to California to be near his daughter. It is a small spread, but it has good grazing land and a decent house. He is asking a fair price, but nobody in these parts has the cash right now." "I do not have that kind of money, Sheriff," Samuel said. "I know that. But what if there was a way to earn it? Old Henry Peterson has been looking for someone to help him with his freight business. He is getting too old to make the long hauls himself, but he still gets contracts. The pay is good, and if you worked for him for 6 months, you could probably save enough for a down payment on the right place. Tom might even agree to hold the land for you if you showed good faith." Florence felt hope blooming in her chest like a desert flower after rain. She looked at Samuel, trying to read his expression. He seemed torn, uncertainty and longing warring in his eyes. "Why would you do this?" Samuel asked Marcus. "Yesterday you wanted me gone." Marcus glanced at his sister, then back at Samuel. "Because Florence is right. This town needs good men. And because I have seen what happens to people who drift too long. They lose themselves. They forget what it is like to belong somewhere. If you are willing to work hard and prove yourself, I am willing to give you a chance." And if I fail, then you fail. But at least you will have tried. That is more than most men can say. Samuel was quiet for a long moment, and Florence held her breath. She could see him weighing the decision, considering all the angles. Finally, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I will take that chance on one condition." "What condition?" Marcus asked. Samuel looked directly at Florence. "That Miss Mitchell understands I am not making any promises. I do not know if I can be the kind of man who settles down. I do not know if I will succeed or fail, but I will try, honestly and with everything I have." "I understand," Florence said softly. "That is all anyone can do." Marcus seemed satisfied with this exchange. "Good. Come by the office this afternoon and I will introduce you to Henry. He is expecting you." As Marcus walked away, Florence and Samuel stood in the stable yard, the rising sun painting the mountains to the west in shades of gold and rose. Samuel looked down at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You are a dangerous woman, Florence Mitchell." "Why do you say that?" "Because you make a man believe things are possible." Over the following weeks, Florence watched Samuel integrate himself into the life of Fairplay. He worked for Henry Peterson with a dedication and competence that impressed everyone. The freight business required hard physical labor, loading and unloading heavy cargo, driving wagons over rough mountain roads, and dealing with difficult customers. Samuel handled it all without complaint. Florence found herself inventing reasons to visit the freight office. She would bring lunch for Henry, or offer to help with the bookkeeping, or simply happen to be walking past when Samuel returned from a delivery. Each time she saw him, they talked a little longer, learned a little more about each other. She discovered that Samuel had served in the war at 17, too young but desperate to make a difference. He had seen terrible things, lost friends, and returned home to find his family farm seized for unpaid taxes. His parents had both died while he was away, his mother of grief and his father of pneumonia. With nothing to return to, he had simply started walking. "I told myself I was looking for something," Samuel admitted one afternoon as they sat on the steps of the freight office, sharing a canteen of cool water. "But truthfully, I think I was running away. It hurt less to keep moving than to stay still and remember what I had lost." "I am sorry," Florence said. "I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been. It was a long time ago. Pain does not care about time. It stays with us until we figure out how to let it go." Samuel looked at her with those intense blue eyes. "How did you become so wise?" "I am not wise. I just pay attention, and I lost my parents too, remember? It is different when you still have family left, but the grief is the same, that emptiness that never quite goes away. But you had your brother, you had a home." "Yes," Florence agreed, "I did, and I am grateful for that. But there are different kinds of loneliness, Samuel. You can be surrounded by familiar things and still feel utterly alone." He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Is that how you feel, alone?" Florence considered the question honestly. "Sometimes. Marcus loves me, and I know he would do anything for me. But he is my brother, not my friend. And most of the women in this town are older and married with children. We do not have much in common. I have always felt like I was waiting for something to happen, for life to really begin." "Does that sound foolish?" "No," Samuel said. "It sounds honest." Their friendship deepened as summer turned to autumn. Samuel proved himself reliable and hardworking, and gradually the townspeople began to accept him. He started attending church on Sundays, not because Marcus required it, but because Florence sang in the choir, and he liked listening to her voice. He helped old Mrs. Henderson repair her fence when it collapsed in a windstorm. He broke up a fight at the saloon without throwing a single punch, simply talking the two drunken men down until they were calm enough to see reason. "Your Samuel is quite the diplomat," Mrs. Henderson told Florence one day at the general store. "My George says he has never seen anyone handle drunk cowboys that smoothly." "He is not my Samuel," Florence protested, though her traitorous heart skipped at the words. "Oh, he is, dear. Everyone can see it. The way he looks at you during Sunday service, like you are the only person in the whole church. The way he always knows when you are nearby, even if his back is turned. That man is smitten, and if you have a lick of sense, you will do something about it." Florence had noticed the way Samuel looked at her. She had felt it like a physical touch, warming her from the inside out. But he maintained a careful distance, never overstepping the bounds of propriety. He never tried to hold her hand or steal a moment alone with her. He was unfailingly respectful, and while Florence appreciated his restraint, part of her wished he would be a little less proper. The turning point came in October, when the aspens turned gold and the nights grew cold enough to frost. Samuel had saved enough money to make an offer on the right ranch, and Tom had agreed to sell with terms. Samuel would pay half now and half over the next year, with the understanding that if he defaulted, the land would revert to Tom. "I am going to look at the property tomorrow," Samuel told Florence as they walked along the creek that ran through town. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Would you like to come with me? I would appreciate your opinion." Florence's heart leaped. "I would love to." The next day, they rode out to the Wright Ranch together. Marcus had given Florence permission to go, though he insisted that Mrs. Henderson come along as a chaperone. The older woman happily agreed, settling herself in the back of Samuel's wagon with a knowing smile. The ranch was about 5 miles from town, nestled in a valley with the mountains rising dramatically behind it. The house was small but solidly built, with a wide porch and a stone chimney. The barn needed some repairs and the fences wanted mending, but the bones of the place were good. "It needs work," Samuel said as they walked the property. "A lot of work, but it has potential." Florence could see it too. She imagined the house with a fresh coat of paint, flowers growing along the porch, curtains in the windows. She imagined horses in the pasture and chickens in the yard. She imagined a life here, and the vision was so clear it took her breath away. "It is perfect," she said. Samuel looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. "Florence, I need to ask you something." "What is it?" He took a deep breath, and she realized he was nervous. "Why did you push so hard for me to stay? And do not tell me it is because this town needed a capable man. There are capable men everywhere. Why me specifically?" Florence felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment, she realized. The moment where she could be honest or deflect, where she could take a risk or play it safe. "Because from the moment I saw you, I felt something I had never felt before," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Like I had been waiting for you my entire life without knowing it. Like the world suddenly made sense in a way it never had before. I know that sounds dramatic and probably foolish, but it is the truth. I wanted you to stay because I could not bear the thought of you leaving." Samuel stared at her, his blue eyes wide with surprise and something that looked like wonder. "Florence, I have nothing to offer you. This ranch is mortgaged. I am living week to week on my wages from Henry. I am a man with a past I am not proud of and a future that is uncertain at best. I do not care about any of that. You should care. You deserve someone established, someone who can give you security." "I deserve someone who sees me," Florence said fiercely. "Someone who does not treat me like a fragile thing that needs to be protected from life. Someone who understands what it is like to want more than what you have. You see me, Samuel. You always have." "I see you," Samuel agreed, taking a step closer. "I see a woman who is brave and kind and far too good for a drifter like me. I see someone who makes me want to be better, to try harder, to believe that I can have something permanent in this world. But Florence, I am terrified that I will disappoint you." "Then we will be disappointed together," she said. "But I would rather take that risk than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." Samuel reached out and cupped her face in his calloused hands, his touch gentle despite the roughness of his skin. "You are remarkable. Do you know that? So you have mentioned." He smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger and lighter. "I am going to kiss you now, if that is all right." "It is more than all right," Florence whispered. His lips met hers, soft and questioning at first, then deeper as she responded. Florence felt like she was falling and flying at the same time, her entire body alive with sensation. His arms came around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him, into the kiss, into the moment that felt like destiny. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Florence Mitchell. I think I have loved you since the moment you stood up to your brother in that sheriff's office, all righteous indignation on behalf of a stranger. I did not think I deserved to love anyone, but then you happened, and suddenly nothing else mattered except being worthy of you." "You already are worthy," Florence said, tears pricking her eyes. "You always have been. You just had to see it yourself." "Ahem, Mrs. Henderson called from where she had been diplomatically examining the barn. "I think we should be getting back to town before it gets dark, and perhaps before the sheriff comes looking for us." Florence and Samuel laughed, reluctantly separating but keeping their hands clasped. As they drove back to Fairplay with Mrs. Henderson offering cheerful commentary about the property and the weather and everything except what she had just witnessed, Florence felt a contentment she had never experienced before. The future was still uncertain, still full of challenges and unknowns, but she would face it with Samuel by her side. Marcus took the news of their courtship better than Florence had expected. He pulled Samuel aside for a long conversation that neither man would discuss afterward, but whatever was said, Marcus seemed satisfied. He gave Samuel and Florence his blessing, with the stipulation that they have a proper engagement period. "At least 6 months," Marcus said firmly. "You both need time to be sure this is what you want." "I am already sure," Florence protested. 6 months, Marcus repeated. "That is non-negotiable." So they agreed to wait, though it was the longest 6 months of Florence's life. Samuel worked tirelessly to improve the ranch while continuing his freight deliveries for Henry. He repaired the barn, mended the fences, and even hired a crew to help him build an addition onto the house. Florence spent her free time sewing curtains and quilts, planning the garden she would plant in spring, and helping Samuel in whatever way she could. They saw each other every day, and with each passing week, Florence fell more deeply in love. She loved the way Samuel sang old folk songs while he worked, his voice rough but melodic. She loved how he was patient with animals and children, how he always had time to help someone in need. She loved his quiet strength, his determination to build something lasting. Winter came early that year, blanketing Fairplay in snow by early November. Samuel worried about the horses on his property and about whether the repairs to the barn would hold through the harsh Colorado winter. Florence helped him stock supplies and prepare for the worst, and when a blizzard hit in December, she was there helping him keep the animals safe and warm. They worked side by side for 3 days while the storm raged, sleeping in shifts, making sure the stove stayed lit and the animals had food and water. By the time the storm passed, and the sun emerged brilliant and blinding on the white landscape, Florence realized she was as comfortable with Samuel as if they had been married for years. They worked together seamlessly, anticipated each other's needs, and trusted each other completely. "This is what it would be like," Samuel said one evening as they sat by the stove in his small house, both exhausted but satisfied. "Marriage to me would not be easy, Florence. There would be hard winters and difficult times. There would be worry and struggle. Are you sure this is the life you want?" Florence looked at him, at his wind-burned face and his tired eyes and his strong hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. "I have never been more sure of anything." He set down his mug and pulled her into his arms. "I will spend every day of my life trying to make you happy." "You already make me happy," she said, "just by being who you are." Christmas came, and Florence gave Samuel a shirt she had sewn herself, every stitch placed with love. He gave her a music box he had ordered from Denver, delicate and beautiful, that played a waltz when opened. "I heard you mention once that your mother had a music box," Samuel said as Florence carefully turned it over in her hands, tears streaming down her face. "I know this cannot replace the one you lost, but I wanted you to have something that reminded you of her." "It is perfect," Florence whispered. "Samuel, this is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." On New Year's Eve, the entire town gathered for a celebration at the church hall. There was music and dancing, food and laughter. Samuel asked Florence to dance, and she accepted, her hand fitting perfectly in his as he led her around the floor. They were not the most skilled dancers, but they moved together naturally, as if they had been doing this for a lifetime. "2 more months," Samuel murmured in her ear. "Then you will be my wife. I already feel like your wife in my heart. So do I. But I want to do this right. I want to honor your brother's wishes and give you the wedding you deserve." They had set the date for the first day of March, when the worst of winter would be over and spring would be beginning to return to the mountains. Florence was both impatient for the day to arrive and savoring every moment of their engagement. There was something special about this time of anticipation, of planning their future together. In January, Samuel completed the addition to the house, creating 2 extra bedrooms and a larger kitchen. "For when we have children," he said, and Florence felt her heart swell at the thought. She imagined little ones running through the house, filling it with laughter and noise and life. February brought a thaw, and with it came trouble. A group of cattle rustlers had been operating in the area, hitting several ranches and making off with valuable livestock. Marcus organized posses to try and catch them, but they were always one step ahead. The tension in town grew as more ranchers lost animals they could not afford to replace. "We need to be vigilant," Marcus warned at a town meeting. "These men are dangerous and desperate. If you see anything suspicious, report it immediately. Do not try to be heroes." 2 weeks before the wedding, Samuel came home late one night to find evidence that someone had been on his property. Tracks in the snow led to the barn, and one of his horses was spooked. He reported it to Marcus, who came out the next day to investigate. "They are probably scouting," Marcus said grimly, "figuring out which ranches are vulnerable. I will have Samuel make regular patrols out here." "I can defend my own property," Samuel said. "I do not doubt it. But I would rather we catch these men before anyone gets hurt. Just be careful." That night, Samuel insisted that Florence stay in town rather than visiting the ranch. She protested, but he was adamant. "I will not risk you being here if those rustlers come back. Please, Florence. For my peace of mind." She agreed reluctantly, though she hated being separated from him. The next few days passed without incident, and Florence began to hope that the rustlers had moved on. Then, 3 days before the wedding, gunshots rang out in the middle of the night, coming from the direction of Samuel's ranch. Florence woke to Marcus pounding on her door, already dressed and armed. "Stay here and lock the door. Do not leave this house until I return." "Samuel," Florence breathed. "Is he all right? I do not know, but I am going to find out." The next few hours were the longest of Florence's life. She paced the house, unable to sit still, praying that Samuel was safe. Mrs. Henderson came over to sit with her, offering tea and comfort, but Florence could barely hear her over the roaring in her ears. Finally, as dawn was breaking, Marcus returned with Samuel riding beside him. Florence flew out the door, not caring that she was in her nightgown with only a shawl thrown over her shoulders. Samuel dismounted and caught her in his arms as she crashed into him. "You are all right," she sobbed against his chest. "Thank God, you are all right." "I am fine," Samuel assured her, holding her tight. "Everything is fine." "What happened?" Florence pulled back to look at him, needing to see with her own eyes that he was uninjured. Marcus explained. "Samuel caught the rustlers trying to steal his horses. He fired warning shots and held them at gunpoint until my deputy and I arrived. We have all 3 men in custody now." "You could have been killed," Florence said, her voice shaking. "But I was not," Samuel said gently, cupping her face in his hands. "I promise you, I was never in real danger. I had the advantage of surprise and position. They did not even know I was there until it was too late." "He did everything right," Marcus added. "He is as capable as I have ever seen. The ranch was never in better hands." Over the next 2 days, the story of how Samuel had single-handedly stopped the rustlers spread through Fairplay. Men who had been skeptical of the drifter who had settled in their town now offered their respect and friendship. The ranchers whose livestock had been stolen thanked Samuel personally, and several offered to help him with whatever he needed. "This town needs a man like you," one of the older ranchers told Samuel at the general store. "We are lucky you decided to stay." Florence caught Samuel's eye and gave him a small smile. He returned it, his expression full of warmth and affection. That night, as they sat on the porch of her house under Marcus's watchful eye from inside, Samuel took her hand. "I never expected to find this," he said quietly. "A home, a community, people who actually care about me, and most of all, I never expected to find you." "We found each other," Florence corrected. "And I will never let you go." "Good. Because I am not going anywhere. This is my home now. You are my home." Their wedding day dawned clear and bright, the sky a brilliant blue that matched Samuel's eyes. The church was packed with townspeople, all dressed in their finest clothes. Florence wore her mother's wedding dress, which she had carefully altered to fit, and carried a bouquet of early wildflowers that Samuel had somehow managed to find. As she walked down the aisle on Marcus's arm, she saw Samuel waiting at the altar, looking almost unbearably handsome in a new suit. His eyes never left hers, and the love and devotion in his gaze made her breath catch. "Who gives this woman to be married?" the preacher asked. "I do," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. He placed Florence's hand in Samuel's, then leaned close to whisper, "Take care of her." "With my life," Samuel promised. The ceremony was simple but beautiful. They exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other through all the days of their lives. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and told Samuel he could kiss his bride, the whole church erupted in applause and cheers. The kiss was soft and sweet and filled with promise. When they pulled apart, both smiling, Florence felt like she might burst with happiness. This was everything she had ever wanted, everything she had not even known to dream of. The reception was held at the church hall, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the night. Florence danced with Samuel, with Marcus, with half the men in town. But every time she found herself back in Samuel's arms, she felt like she was exactly where she belonged. "Happy?" Samuel asked as they swayed together to a slow waltz. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Florence answered honestly. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you stay that way." They left the reception late in the evening, riding out to the ranch that was now their home. Samuel had prepared everything beautifully, with candles lit throughout the house and flowers on every surface. He carried Florence over the threshold, both of them laughing, and set her down gently in the parlor. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lawson." "I love the sound of that," Florence said, reaching up to pull him down for a kiss. That night, they came together as husband and wife, and Florence discovered depths of love and intimacy she had never imagined. Samuel was gentle and patient, attentive to her needs, making sure she felt cherished and safe. When they finally fell asleep in each other's arms, Florence felt complete in a way she never had before. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work, and money was tight as they worked to pay off the mortgage. But they faced every obstacle together, supporting each other through difficult times and celebrating victories both large and small. In May, Florence planted her garden, spending hours in the warm sunshine coaxing vegetables and flowers from the rich soil. Samuel built her a fence to keep out the deer and rabbits, and soon they had fresh produce to eat and sell at the market in town. In July, a wildfire threatened the valley, and everyone pitched in to fight the flames and protect the ranches. Samuel worked for 3 days straight, digging fire breaks and beating back the fire with wet blankets. Florence and the other women kept food and water coming for the firefighters, and when the fire was finally contained, the whole community celebrated their collective effort. In September, Florence discovered she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks but wanted to be certain before she told Samuel. When she finally gave him the news one evening over dinner, he froze with his fork halfway to his mouth, his eyes going wide. "Truly?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Truly," Florence confirmed, smiling through happy tears. Samuel dropped his fork and was around the table in an instant, gathering her into his arms. "We are going to have a baby. Florence, we are going to have a baby." "I know," she laughed, holding him tight. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am overwhelmed. I am terrified. I am more grateful than I have words to express." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes suspiciously bright. "You have given me everything. A home, a purpose, a reason to believe in tomorrow, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" "We both got lucky," Florence said. "We found each other." Marcus was equally thrilled at the news, immediately becoming even more protective of his sister than usual. He insisted that she not overwork herself, that Samuel hire help for the heavier ranch work, that she see the doctor regularly. Florence tolerated his fussing with good grace, knowing it came from love. Winter came again, and this time they were prepared. The barn was solid, the house was tight against the cold, and they had plenty of supplies laid in. As the snow fell and the days grew short, Florence spent her time sewing tiny clothes for the baby and preparing the nursery Samuel had built in one of the new bedrooms. "What do you hope for?" Samuel asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting gently on her swelling belly. "A boy or a girl, I do not care," Florence said honestly, "as long as the baby is healthy." "I hope they have your spirit," Samuel said, "your courage and your kindness. And I hope they have your strength and your integrity." The baby kicked, and Samuel's face lit up with wonder. "Did you feel that?" "I feel it all the time now. The baby is very active. Our child," Samuel murmured, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Our family." In April, as the snow was melting and the first green shoots were appearing, Florence went into labor. It was a long and difficult birth, lasting through the night and into the next morning. Samuel paced outside the bedroom, wringing his hands and jumping at every sound. Marcus sat with him, offering what comfort he could, though he looked nearly as anxious as the expectant father. Finally, as the sun climbed high in the sky, a baby's cry rang out. The midwife opened the door with a broad smile. "You can come in now, Mr. Lawson. Come meet your son." Samuel practically ran into the room, his eyes searching for Florence. She lay propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. When she looked up at him, her smile could have lit the darkest night. "Samuel, meet your son." He approached reverently, sitting on the edge of the bed and looking down at the small, red face of his child. The baby had stopped crying and was looking around with unfocused eyes, one tiny fist waving in the air. Samuel carefully reached out and let the baby grasp his finger, and the look of absolute love that crossed his face brought tears to Florence's eyes. "He is perfect," Samuel breathed. "Florence, you are amazing. He is perfect. You want to hold him. I am afraid I will drop him." "You will not drop him. Here." Florence carefully transferred the baby into Samuel's arms, showing him how to support the head. Samuel held his son with such careful reverence that it made Florence's heart ache with love for both of them. "Hello, little one," Samuel said softly. "I am your father. And I promise you, I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are loved and wanted. You will never wonder where you belong because you will always have a home with us." They named him William Marcus Lawson, after Samuel's father and Florence's brother. Marcus was deeply moved by the honor, and from that day forward, he was the most devoted uncle imaginable. The months that followed were exhausting but joyful. William was a good baby, healthy and curious, and Samuel proved to be a natural father. He was patient and gentle, happy to walk the floor at night when William was fussy, to change diapers, to do whatever was needed. Florence watched him with their son and fell even more deeply in love with her husband. As William grew, he began to show signs of having his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. He was quick to smile and laugh, bringing joy to everyone who met him. The ranch prospered under Samuel's management, and they were able to make extra payments on the mortgage, getting ahead of schedule. On their second anniversary, Samuel surprised Florence with a trip to Colorado Springs. They left William with Marcus and Mrs. Henderson and spent 3 days exploring the town, eating at restaurants and staying in a real hotel. It was the first time Florence had been anywhere beyond Fairplay, and she loved every moment of it. "Thank you for this," she said as they sat in the hotel dining room, enjoying a meal they had not had to prepare themselves. "I did not realize how much I needed a break." "You work too hard," Samuel said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You take care of William, you help with the ranch, you keep our home running smoothly. You deserve to be pampered occasionally." "We are partners," Florence reminded him. "You work just as hard as I do." "Then we both deserve a break. But more than that, I wanted to give you an adventure. I know you said once that you had never been anywhere, that you wanted to see the world. I cannot give you Paris or New York, but I can give you Colorado Springs." Florence squeezed his hand, her eyes shining with happy tears. "You have given me so much more than trips or places, Samuel. You have given me a life full of purpose and love. You have given me a family. That is worth more than all the adventures in the world. Still, I promise you, one day we will travel. When William is older and the ranch is more established, we will see everything you want to see." They returned home to find William thriving under his uncle's care and the ranch running smoothly. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm, the seasons passing in their eternal cycle. Florence planted her garden every spring, harvested in the fall, and spent winters planning for the year ahead. Samuel continued to improve the ranch, adding cattle to their horse operation, building a new stable, and earning a reputation as one of the most reliable ranchers in the area. When William was 2, Florence discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, and she delivered a healthy baby girl in the spring of their 4th year of marriage. They named her Sarah Grace, and she had Florence's dark hair and Samuel's blue eyes. William was initially suspicious of this tiny intruder, but Samuel patiently taught him how to be a gentle big brother, and soon William was fiercely protective of his little sister. The years continued to pass, marked by milestones both large and small. William started school in town, riding in with Samuel when he had business there. Sarah began to walk and talk, her personality emerging bright and curious. The ranch continued to prosper, and they finally paid off the mortgage, hosting a celebration where half of Fairplay turned out to congratulate them. "We did it," Samuel said that night after everyone had gone home and the children were asleep. He and Florence sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "This is really ours now. No debts, no obligations, just ours." "I am so proud of you," Florence said. "You came here with nothing, and look at what you have built." "What we have built," Samuel corrected. "I could not have done any of this without you. You are the foundation of everything good in my life." Florence leaned her head on his shoulder, contentment filling every corner of her being. "Do you ever think about that day when we first met, when those men were shooting in the street?" "All the time," Samuel admitted. "I think about how close I came to riding out the next morning, how I almost missed all of this because I was too afraid to hope for something better. I am glad you stayed. So am I. Best decision I ever made, even though you are the one who actually made it for me." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for seeing something in me worth saving." "I did not save you," Florence said. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a reason to try." When William was 6 and Sarah was 4, Florence gave birth to their 3rd and final child, another boy they named James Henry after no one in particular, but because they liked the sound of it. James was a calm, easy baby, content to watch the world with wise eyes that seemed far too old for his tiny face. 3 children, Samuel marveled, holding James while William and Sarah clamored for his attention. "When did we become such a large family?" "I have no idea," Florence laughed, "but I love it." Their house was always full of noise and laughter, of the chaos that came with raising children. There were scraped knees to bandage and hurt feelings to soothe, lessons to teach and discipline to enforce. But through it all, Florence and Samuel faced everything together, united in their love for each other and their children. Marcus remained a constant presence in their lives, never marrying but content to be the beloved uncle who spoiled his nieces and nephew and helped out on the ranch whenever needed. He eventually retired as sheriff, passing the badge to his deputy, and spent his later years fishing and telling stories to the grandchildren who adored him. As the years passed and their children grew, Florence and Samuel grew older too. Gray appeared in Samuel's dark hair, and lines formed at the corners of Florence's eyes. But their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, enriched by years of shared experiences and overcome challenges. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party with the entire town invited. People came from all over the valley to celebrate, bringing food and gifts and stories about how Samuel and Florence had touched their lives over the years. "I never expected this," Samuel said quietly to Florence as they surveyed the crowd gathered in their yard. "When I rode into Fairplay all those years ago, I was just looking for a hot meal and a place to rest for the night. I never imagined I would find a home, a family, all of this." "This town needs a man like you," Florence said, echoing the words she had spoken to him so long ago. "That is what I told you, do you remember?" "I remember everything," Samuel said. "Every word, every moment. My life started the day I met you." "Mine too," Florence agreed. They danced together as the sun set behind the mountains, moving to music played by local musicians, surrounded by their children and friends and neighbors. And as Samuel held her close, Florence thought about the scared young woman she had been, desperate for something more than the safe, predictable life she had known. She had found everything she had been searching for and so much more than she had ever dared to dream. The years continued to pass. William grew up to be a rancher like his father, taking over more of the operation as Samuel grew older. He married a schoolteacher from Denver and gave Florence and Samuel their first grandchildren. Sarah became a teacher herself, opening a school in Fairplay that served the growing community. She married a carpenter who built her a beautiful house right in town. James, the youngest, had inherited his father's wanderlust and spent several years traveling before eventually settling down, working as a surveyor and mapmaker. All three children remained close to their parents and to each other, and the family gatherings at the ranch were legendary throughout the valley. Florence loved having her home filled with children and grandchildren, loved watching Samuel teach the little ones to ride and rope, passing on the skills and values that mattered to him. On their 30th anniversary, Samuel took Florence back to the spot where he had first considered buying the ranch, where they had first kissed. The land was different now, improved and prosperous, but the mountains still rose majestically behind them, and the creek still bubbled over the rocks. "Do you have any regrets?" Samuel asked as they stood hand in hand, surveying the vista. "Not a single one," Florence said honestly. "This life has been everything I hoped for and more. What about you? Do you ever wish you had kept drifting, seen more of the world?" Samuel turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Florence, you are my world. Everything worth seeing, everything worth having, I have found right here with you. I was lost before I met you, and you gave me a purpose. You gave me a home. You gave me a reason to be the man I always hoped I could be." "You were always that man," Florence said. "You just needed to believe it." "Maybe," Samuel agreed, "but you made me believe it. You never doubted me, even when I doubted myself. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They kissed there in the golden afternoon light, the same way they had 3 decades before, and the love between them was as strong and true as it had ever been. Florence and Samuel grew old together, their hair turning white, their steps slowing. But they remained active and engaged with life, with their family, with their community. They saw their grandchildren grow and begin having children of their own. They watched Fairplay evolve from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools and churches and businesses. Through it all, they remained devoted to each other. Samuel still brought Florence wildflowers every spring. Florence still made Samuel his favorite meals. They still sat together on the porch every evening, watching the sun set behind the mountains, holding hands and talking about everything and nothing. On a warm summer evening in 1918, 40 years after the day they first met, Samuel and Florence sat on their porch surrounded by 3 generations of family. Their children were there with their spouses, their grandchildren with their growing families, and even a few great-grandchildren toddled around the yard. There was music and laughter, the smell of food cooking, and the sound of happy voices raised in conversation. "Look at what we created," Samuel said softly to Florence as they watched their family. "All these people, all this life. It all started with you taking a chance on a drifter." "It all started with a drifter taking a chance on staying," Florence corrected. "You could have left. You chose to stay and build this life. Best choice I ever made." William approached them, now a middle-aged man himself, with a glass of lemonade for each of his parents. "You two doing all right? Need anything?" "We are perfect," Florence said, accepting the glass with a smile. "Just enjoying watching everyone," "Sarah wants to know if you will tell the story again," William said. "About how you met. The grandkids never get tired of hearing it." Samuel and Florence exchanged a glance, the kind of wordless communication that came from decades of marriage. They had told the story dozens of times over the years, but it never got old. It was their story, the foundation of everything that had come after. "Gather everyone around," Samuel said. "We will tell it one more time." As their family settled on the grass and the porch steps, the children looking up with eager faces, Samuel began the tale. He spoke of riding into Fairplay with nothing but his horse and his gun, of the gunfight that had nearly cost Florence her life, of the sheriff who had given him a chance when he had no reason to. Then Florence took over, speaking of seeing Samuel for the first time and somehow knowing that he was different, that he was important. She spoke of convincing her brother to let him stay, of watching him prove himself to the town, of falling in love slowly and surely. Together, they told of their courtship and wedding, of building the ranch and starting their family. They spoke of challenges overcome and joys celebrated, of a life built on love and trust and partnership. As they finished the story, with Samuel proposing again the way he had all those years ago, and Florence accepting with tears in her eyes just as she had then, their family erupted in applause and happy tears. The grandchildren swarmed them with hugs, and even the adults seemed moved by the retelling. Later, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet, Samuel and Florence prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of 40 years of marriage. As they lay together in the darkness, Florence nestled against Samuel's side, his arm around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For everything. For staying when you wanted to run, for building this life with me, for loving me all these years." "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible," Samuel replied. "For believing in me when I did not believe in myself, for making me understand what home truly means." They fell asleep that way, wrapped in each other's arms, two souls that had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. The years continued to pass gently. Samuel and Florence eventually needed help with the daily tasks of living, and their children made sure they were never alone, always cared for. They celebrated their 45th anniversary surrounded by family, then their 50th, a milestone that few couples achieved. On a crisp autumn morning in 1923, Samuel passed away peacefully in his sleep, Florence holding his hand. He was 70 years old, and he had lived a full and meaningful life. The funeral was attended by what seemed like half of Colorado, people traveling from across the state to pay their respects to a man who had touched so many lives. Florence grieved deeply for her husband, the love of her life, her partner in all things. But she took comfort in their children and grandchildren, in the legacy they had built together. She lived for 3 more years, spending her days surrounded by family, telling stories about Samuel and the life they had shared. On a spring morning in 1926, Florence joined her husband. She was 71 years old, and she died with a smile on her face, her children holding her hands. In her final moments, she whispered, "I see him. Samuel is here." They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Under the vast Colorado sky they had both loved. The headstones were simple but beautiful, inscribed with their names and dates and a single line that captured the essence of their relationship. 2 souls, 1 heart, forever home. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations. The house Samuel had built and Florence had made into a home still stood decades later, a testament to the strength of their love and the permanence of what they had created. Their descendants continued to gather there for holidays and celebrations, And the story of the sheriff's sister and the drifting cowboy became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. In the town of Fairplay, Colorado, a plaque was eventually placed in the town square, commemorating Samuel and Florence Lawson and their contributions to the community. It mentioned Samuel's bravery in stopping the rustlers, his years of service to his neighbors, his role in helping the town grow and prosper. But mostly, it spoke of a love story that had inspired everyone who witnessed it. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures come from taking a chance on someone and believing in the possibility of home. The wildflowers that Samuel had always picked for Florence still grew in abundance around their graves every spring, bright splashes of color against the green grass. People said it was as if the land itself remembered their love story and wanted to honor it. And maybe, in some way, it did. Their story lived on, not just in the memories of their descendants, but in the very fabric of Fairplay itself. The ranch they had built, the family they had raised, the community they had served, all stood as monuments to what could be achieved when two people committed themselves to building something lasting. Florence had been right all those years ago when she stood in the stable yard and told Samuel that the town needed a man like him. But what she had not known then was that she needed him too, and he had needed her just as much. They had saved each other, completing each other in ways neither had thought possible. In the end, their story was simple but profound. A drifter with nothing had found a woman willing to see beyond his circumstances to the man he could become. A woman trapped by safety and predictability had found a man willing to take the risk of staying, of building, of loving. Together, they had created something neither could have achieved alone, a life rich with love and purpose and meaning. And when the sun set over the mountains each evening, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and when the wind whispered through the aspens, and when the wildflowers bloomed each spring, it was as if Samuel and Florence were still there, still together, still in love. Their spirits remained woven into the land they had loved, the family they had created, and the community they had served. The drifter had found his home. The sheriff's sister had found her adventure, and together they had found forever. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived in Fairplay, some on the original ranch and others scattered throughout the town. They carried the blood of Samuel and Florence in their veins and their story in their hearts. And when they faced difficult decisions or hard times, they thought about the courage it had taken for their ancestors to take that initial chance on each other, and they found strength in that legacy. The house on the ranch, now over a century old, had been carefully maintained and modernized while preserving its original character. The bedroom where Samuel and Florence had slept for 40 years, where they had loved and laughed and dreamed together, remained almost exactly as it had been. Their descendants treated it with reverence, understanding that they were guardians of something precious and sacred. In the town museum, there was a small exhibit dedicated to Samuel and Florence. It included photographs from their wedding and later years, the music box Samuel had given Florence that first Christmas, letters they had written to each other during the brief periods they were apart, and Florence's journal where she had recorded her thoughts and feelings about falling in love with the drifting cowboy who had changed her life. Visitors to the museum often lingered at that exhibit, drawn by the obvious love that radiated from every artifact and photograph. Young couples especially seemed to find inspiration there, reading the letters with tears in their eyes, studying the photographs for clues about how to build a love that would last a lifetime. "Look at the way he is looking at her in this picture," they would say, pointing to a photograph taken at their 50th anniversary celebration. Even at 70, even after 5 decades of marriage, Samuel's expression as he gazed at Florence showed a love that was as fresh and intense as it must have been on their wedding day. And Florence, her hair white and her face lined but still beautiful, looked at Samuel with equal devotion, her hand clasped in his, their bodies leaning toward each other in the unconscious way of people who had been together so long they moved as one. Their story had become more than just family history. It had become part of the identity of Fairplay itself, a founding myth of sorts that spoke to the best of what the town represented. It was a story about second chances and the courage to change. It was about seeing the potential in people and giving them the opportunity to become who they were meant to be. It was about love as a transformative force, capable of healing old wounds and creating new possibilities. Every year on the anniversary of their wedding, the town held a celebration in their honor. There was a dance at the church hall, just like there had been at their wedding reception, and couples young and old came together to remember what it meant to commit to another person, to build a life together through good times and bad. The current Lawson family, now in its sixth generation since Samuel and Florence, always hosted a gathering at the ranch on that day. They would stand on the hill where Samuel and Florence were buried, the entire family together, and someone would read from Florence's journal or share a story passed down through the years. They would be so proud, the eldest Lawson would always say, looking out over the assembled family, the ranch, the mountains beyond. Look at what they started. Look at what their love created. And it was true. From one drifter and one woman brave enough to believe in him had come this entire legacy. Scores of people who existed because Samuel had decided to stay in Fairplay that long ago morning, because Florence had stood in a stable yard and told him the town needed a man like him. In the quiet moments, when the wind rustled through the cottonwoods and the creek burbled over its rocky bed, it was easy to imagine Samuel and Florence still there, still together. Samuel working on the ranch, his movements sure and practiced. Florence in her garden, coaxing life from the earth with patient hands. Their children running through the yard, filling the air with laughter. The love story of Samuel Lawson and Florence Mitchell Lawson had long since passed into legend, but its effects continued to ripple outward, touching lives in ways both large and small. It reminded people that love was worth fighting for, that taking chances could lead to extraordinary things, that redemption and second chances were possible for everyone. Most importantly, it proved that home was not a place but a person, that belonging came from being truly seen and accepted by another soul. Samuel had been a man without roots, drifting through life with no anchor, until Florence had given him a reason to stop moving. And Florence had been a woman with roots so deep she felt trapped, until Samuel had shown her that roots did not have to mean stagnation, that growth and stability could coexist. Together, they had built something that endured long after they were gone. A family, a legacy, a love that transcended time and became immortal in its way, living on in the stories told and retold, in the land they had tended, in the descendants who carried their blood and their values forward into the future. The sun continued to rise and set over Fairplay, Colorado. The seasons continued their eternal cycle. Children were born and grew and had children of their own. The town evolved and changed with the times. But the story of the sheriff's sister and the drifting cowboy remained constant, a touchstone of enduring love and the transformative power of giving someone a chance. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, Samuel and Florence were together still, their hands clasped, their love undiminished by death or time. They had found their forever home in each other, and nothing, not even the end of life itself, could change that fundamental truth. Their story was complete, every chapter written, every promise kept. The drifter had become a respected rancher and devoted husband and father. The sheriff's sister had found the adventure and purpose she had been seeking. Together, they had built a life that mattered, that made a difference, that continued to inspire long after they were gone. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, full of courage and determination, and the belief that anything was possible if you were willing to take a chance. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important journeys end not in distant lands, but in the heart of another person. And it proved that the greatest adventures are often the ones we build day by day, moment by moment, with the person we love by our side. The town of Fairplay continued to thrive, built on the foundation laid by people like Samuel and Florence, people who had believed in community and hard work and treating others with respect and kindness. The ranch continued to produce fine horses and cattle, managed by Lawson descendants who honored the legacy they had inherited. And on quiet evenings, when families gathered on their porches to watch the sunset, parents still told their children the story of how a drifting cowboy had ridden into town with nothing and had found everything that mattered. They told how the sheriff's sister had seen beyond the dusty clothes and the lack of prospects to the man underneath, the man worth believing in. True love, they would say, is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone worth fighting for and then doing the work to build a life together. That is what Samuel and Florence did. That is their gift to all of us. The wildflowers continued to bloom on that hillside every spring, bright and beautiful, a living memorial to a love that had never died. Visitors to the graves often left tokens, small stones, fresh flowers, notes thanking Samuel and Florence for the example they had set. And in the great tapestry of lives lived and loves found, in the endless story of the human heart seeking connection and meaning, the tale of Samuel Lawson and Florence Mitchell Lawson shone brightly, a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt lost, anyone who had ever taken a chance on love, anyone who had ever believed that home was not a place but a person. Their story was complete, their love was eternal, and the legacy they had built together would endure for generations yet to come, a testament to the truth that love, real love, never truly ends. It simply transforms, living on in new ways, touching new lives, inspiring new stories of courage and commitment and the beautiful possibilities that unfold when two people decide to build a life together. The end.